Agano presidential candidate is arriving there, David Waihiga Mwaure, and I'll go straight to Lulu Hassan, who is going to be speaking to him in a short while.
Na barabara kabisa, mpenzi mtazamaji, shukran sana Wajackoyah. Kama mnavyoona tayari David Waihiga Mwaure tayari kishawasili wa chama cha Agano akiwa na mgombea mwenza.
All right, that does seem that we're having a bit of a signal problem there, but yes, the gentleman you just saw there is the Agano presidential candidate, that is David Waihiga Mwaure, who is going to be taking part in this debate. And I just want to continue with that, getting some quick thoughts around this whole thing of what's really happening with the IBC. And I think maybe I go to Dennis.
I don't know. I've always been worried about IBC preparedness. There are no good signs. We're not seeing good signs. I don't want to be dramatic, but I wonder what these good signs mean in terms of the fate of the election itself, because it seems to be going worse. 2013, we were here. 2017, it got worse. Now we're 2022, it's even worse. It's just not prepared. And
but what's the problem, according to you?
From a technical perspective, I think there's a way in which organization is not being done. The procurement is not being done well. We don't have the audit report from KPMG. We're not sure about ballot papers. Ballot papers are coming before Gazette notices are
okay,
issued.
Dennis, I'm sorry. We have to go back, and I think we are now ready with the Agano presidential candidate, Waihiga Mwaure.
Na barabara kabisa, mtazamaji, kama mnavyoona David Waihiga Mwaure tayari wa Agano Party kisha wasili kwa mjadala ambao umesubiriwa kwa hamu na gamu. Labda nimuulize mawili matatu kuhusiana na mjadala wa siku hii ya leo. Karibu sana David.
Asante sana dadangu.
Naam, umejitayarisha vipi siku hii ya leo?
Nimejitayarisha kabisa ili nikuje niwaeleze wa Kenya sababu gani ni lazima safari tubadilishe na sababu gani ni lazima wachague mtu mpya na yeye ndiye mimi. Tunakuja kuelewa kwamba hii ni miaka 59 kutoka wakati tulipata uhuru. Tumekuwa na tabu nyingi hata baada ya miaka hiyo yote. Na sisi wengine kama mimi nimeingia katika huu uchaguzi kwa sababu naamini ni wakati wa kufagia na kuleta wapya. Na kwamba kila ndoto ya yeyote, hata wewe ambaye huja kuwemo huku ndani, hujulikani, hujuna pesa nyingi ama mahelikopta, unaweza kuwa rais kama vile dada yetu Liputa alivyotuambia kila ndoto ni valid.
Na unahisi vipi kuhusiana na mjadala wetu siku hii leo? Unahisi vipi? Hisia zako ni gani?
Mimi kwanza nina furaha kwa sababu ni haki ya Wakenya kutusikia zote. Na natarajia hata kukutana na mgombea yule mwingine, my competitor, na hata wale wengine nawaambia wakuje ili Wakenya waelewe. Na mimi kile ninayofurahia ni ya kwamba yale tumekuwa tukiona kule nje, wakati mwingine hata watu hawasikizi sera ni gani. Wanaangalia magari, wanaangalia vipi, mapambo, lakini leo ni wakati wa kusikiza hasa ni nani anaweza kubadilisha maisha yako.
Okay, shukrani sana.
Asante na shukuru.
Okay. Ndio hivyo tumeweza kumsikia David Waihiga Mwaure akisema kwamba ataeleza sera zake kwa upana zaidi, akitumai kwamba yule mgombea mwenzake ambaye ni mpinzani wake Wajackoyah atakuwa yuko naye katika jukwaa lile. Ni mambo ambayo tunasubiri kuona mtazamaji, lakini kwa hivi sasa moja kwa moja na kurudisha kwake Wajackoyah, endelee na wachanganuzi.
Shukran, Lulu Hassan. So the Agano presidential candidate is in the house, and we will have to wait for that because the two platforms couldn't be more different. But we were talking about the IEBC preparedness and the back and forth we are seeing with the DCI. Dennis, I don't know if you had finished your thoughts.
No, for me, it's not the management problem. I think IEBC now presents for us a political and an economic risk.
Wow, that is big. What are you talking about?
It is. The uncertainty behind all these preparations, it's no longer about management and procurement. We're now talking about, are we going to have an election? Are we going to have an election that is successfully executed? Are we going to have an election that is not disputed? These are now political and economic risks. I think that's where we are.
Prof?
So, Joe, this is a historical problem. This is not just IEBC. The previous electoral bodies have had these same levels of institutionalized and government engineered incompetence because of what elections mean to our governance process. We've not had free and fair elections since 1992. This is not a disputable fact. I think the only credible election we had that we believe the outcome was 2002. So what IBC exhibits today is a comedy of errors in many respects, and institutional incompetence at a colossal, catastrophic level. One scholar of governance called Land Pritchard talks about governance in capability, and talks about isomorphic mimicry, where we've created an institution that mimics that which should be a functional institution that runs election. In every sense it looks like, but it doesn't function like one. So I think that in many respects, if you look at the last 4 elections, we've created a system where IBC is kind of an arm of government that inserts itself in diverting and subverting the will of the people. Now that has created interesting opportunities for perpetrating internal incompetence, in the sense that IBC is just not well organized as an institution with all the capabilities that it needs to run an election. Internally, we talk about procurement issues. We talk about just an election, a plan of action that you would execute to the D-Day of an election. If you ask Chebukati what he's been doing for the last 3 years in preparation for this election, you know, the voter register, the cleaning up of all of that, talking about electoral materials, the ballot papers, the security around that. And as Dennis says, this is an existential risk to the democracy, and is also a threat to the body polity of the country in terms of our sovereignty in many respects.
Sheila, how worried are you about this situation?
Well, the trust deficit levels have always been low for our election management bodies, and largely partly because of how some processes are conducted. Key among them is procurement of key strategic materials.
That must be something you follow keenly.
Yeah,
from
we follow.
TI.
Yes, we follow that keenly. And one of the things that we had urged IBC earlier on is, in the spirit of open procurement, because we know the problem of procurement in this country. It is actually the center of corruption. Most corruption in this country emanates from public procurement. And so the interest that then the procurement of these strategic materials, the ballot papers, the technology has, it meant that there needed to be an attempt to ensure that there was open communication throughout, because when you're looking at some of the claims that were made, was it 4 weeks, 3 weeks ago, coming from politicians, it comes from that whole organization of procurement. So my own take is that there should have been an attempt to be a bit more open, not a bit more, but actually very open in terms of communication, communicating with stakeholders, including the political class. But the other concern that I have is just the ability of our agencies to be able to work together. When you see that kind of spat between the police and IBC, and you wonder whether these are not some things that could have been resolved, bilaterally. Yeah, we expect them to work together. An election, it requires that you're working very closely with security agencies. And I would have expected that kind of, whether it's a misunderstanding or a dispute or whatever contention, should have been sort out, especially because we know how we easily sensationalize things around elections and politics, especially at this time. We're just 2 weeks to the elections. I would have expected that as a matter of national security, this is something that should have been handled. Of course, of course, it's good that it's out in the open, so we know what issues are there, but then we also know that this is something that can potentially, spark several disputes, in regard to the election. And of course, I know the politicians are watching. It's probably a matter, if anyone is preparing the petition, it's already something there.
They are doing more than they're watching. They're talking a lot as well.
Yes. So my concern, Joe, is how our institutions are working, not just the police and IBC, but throughout the planning of this entire election. I have had my concerns in terms of our institutions to be able to work in collaboration. Yeah. Even when you look at how candidates were verified, vetted, and cleared, you could tell that clearly these institutions were not working together. And as a result of that, we now have people who are not credible, who don't meet the qualifications set out in the Constitution, who have been cleared for office. So this problem started earlier on in the election process.
Wow.